Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney. If you're new here, this is Adeline, a little snotty kitty. And today we are going to be talking about my best books of the year, the worst books of the year, all the stats from 2025, and we're also going to talk about any channel updates that are happening for 2026. So, yeah, we're going to start with stats and then work our way through the best books, which there's two categories because I do star rating and then I also do top 3, which are just by impact, books that really stuck out to me. And then I also, of course, have my worst books because we got to do that as well. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the stats. I ended up reading 203 books total. My goal was actually, I think I did 150. So I did read a lot. It was less than last year. I think last year I read 209, I want to say, something like that. So it was just slightly less than last year, but still a crazy number of books. Now, I do read children's books, and I do count those as well. So those are included in there. Unread from my TBR, so books that I put on my TBR in a month and did not get to and didn't get to later on in the year. I ended up with 22 books that I did not end up getting to, and I just put back on my shelves. Page count, it was 64,074. I had 283 hours and 28 minutes of audiobooks. Physical count was 177. Digital, I read 5 books digitally, and I had 21 audiobooks. My average pages per day were 175.54. And then average minutes per day were 46.59. Best month by page count, I did the top 3 for these. And when I had ties, I just included them in that same number and then did another one. So by page count, my top read and by number of books was December. I read 7,487 pages and a total of 30 books. In second place, for page count, we have July with 7,166. And for third place, it was September with 6,789. And then as far as number of books, it was tied between April, July, and September with 23 books each of those months. And then in third place by number of books was March with 19 books. My worst month by page count was May, when I read only 2,979 pages. Second was November with 3,148 pages. And then we had October with 3,324 pages. By number of books, my worst month was actually January, where I only read 9 books. May and November were tied with 10 books each, and then October was also again in third place with 12 books that month. DNFs, I ended up only having 4 DNFs, which actually surprised me. I felt like I DNF'd more this year, but apparently I did not. So I only had 4 DNFs, 2 of which were actually in December. So there's that. And then I had 15 2-stars, 50 3-stars, 68 4-stars, and 75 stars. So I think I know my reading taste pretty well, and I'm picking up books that I really tend to enjoy, with just a few that end up falling flat for me. So that's really great. Let's see here. Rereads, I had 9. Nonfiction, I read 12 nonfiction books this year, which is good. I read 4 of those in 1 month, but I do want to average a nonfiction a month, so I'm really happy with that number. My most read authors, I didn't do the stat before, but I included it this year. So I read the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas, so I ended up reading her 6 times. Matt Dinniman 5 times. My husband and I started the Dungeon Crawler Carl series this year, and we're working our way through that. Lucy Score, I ended up reading 4 books by them. B.K. Borison, I also read 4 books. And then Richard Paul Evans, I read 4 books, all of which I read in December. So there's that. Now we're on to our genres. Now, again, these overlap, so some will fit fantasy and romance, and so the numbers aren't going to add up here. But I had 87 fantasy, 64 romance, 39 contemporary, 31 young adult, 22 mystery, 21 LGBTQIA plus, 19 historical, 19 thriller, 19 sci-fi, 14 horror, 12 literary, 10 middle grade, 10 classics, 8 children's, 5 crime, 4 science, 4 short stories, 4 erotica, 4 dystopian, 3 sports, 3 memoir, 3 magical realism, 3 history, 2 religion, 2 nature, 2 reference, 2 essays, 1 manga, 1 feminism, 1 graphic novel, and 1 biography. My top moods, and so I just put all the moods that Storygraph shows, and the last one I'm not really sure, but I included it because Storygraph had it. So I read adventurous books 93 times, emotional 83, dark 64, mysterious 61, funny 54, lighthearted 51, tense 40, reflective 21, hopeful 21, inspiring 9, informative 7, sad 3, challenging 3, and then this last one, it was relaxing, which was 1, which was, I actually have it still right here because I haven't put these books away. They said The Christmas Thief by Mary Higgins Clark and Carol Higgins Clark was relaxing. It's like a suspense, so I'm not really sure where that stat came from, but Storygraph said it, so I went with it. I mean, it's an easy read. Like, it's fun. Like, I can kind of see it, but it's a little bit weird. So that's it as far as stats. That's what I do. I don't do anything fancy. I just kind of do what Storygraph gives me. I'm not a huge stats person. Like, I like seeing, oh, I read this much and whatnot. And what types of books I read, but I'm not like a huge stat person doing like graphs and all that. So that's just what Storygraph gave me. Now, as far as my best and worst books, normally I would pull the books, and so that way I'm a very physical person and I like having something to hold. But I already have so many books out. Like, I still have all my December books out. I have my January books I'm reading. And so I just didn't feel like pulling down any more books. And so I'm just going to insert pictures and talk about them that way. I'm going to start with my worst books, move on to my top books by impact, and then my top books by star rating will end there. And so I kind of do it battle of the book style, where, like January, February, duke it out, and so on and so forth. And then out of those, they duke it out, and then I have the final 3 is how I work it. So, as far as the worst books of 2025, now some of these I did put the star rating. I didn't do that last year, but some of them were 2 stars and some of them were 3 stars because, some months I didn't have any 2-star reads. So the bottom of the barrel was a 3-star read. And there's one I did not include DNFs in this except for the last month, December. And one of the books I DNF'd, I read half of it, and I also, Becky at Bex Reads, she read the same book. It's like an Advent style book. And so when she talked about it, I got the whole story the way it played out, and I couldn't do one of my 3 stars over it, and so that's the only one that I did DNF, but I read a good chunk of it and I know how the story played out, so like I felt confident putting it as one of my worst books. But normally I would not include DNFs in this because actually there was one book that was even worse than that one that I read halfway, but I had only read like 49 pages of that one, so I didn't feel right putting it there, even though it was worse than this other one. Anyway, so for January, I read a book called Gothic Town by Emily Carpenter. It was a 2-star that I had gotten through a Goodreads giveaway. And I like the idea of it. It's just the way the main character acted didn't really make a lot of sense. And the author focused a lot on that instead of like the story itself. And I think if the author had focused on the story instead of like that drama and characters acting out of context that I didn't think really fit the characters, I think I would have enjoyed it more. So basically, I like the premise of it. You have this woman and her husband, and it does have COVID in it, which I ended up reading a couple books that had COVID in it, and it's just not for me. Like, I lived through it. I don't need it in my stories, you know? So basically, it's during COVID, and they're, I think, in New York, and she has a restaurant, and she ends up having to shut it down. And so they get this opportunity. There's a small town, I want to say in Georgia, but don't quote me on that. I could be mistaken. That was January of last year. It's been a whole year. Georgia, and this town is offering these houses um, for people to move in, and then they'll give you money to like start up a business as well. Like, the town's kind of floundering, and so they're trying to get people into this town. But it's almost like it's a too good to be true. And she falls in love with this house, and she's like, I want that house. And somebody she's talking to, the realtor or whatever, makes it happen, even though that house wasn't part of the program because it's an old house and it's like more new houses that they're using for this program. This was an older house. And there's just something mysterious about the land and like the powerful people in this town. There's something suspicious about them. There's a little bit of like a supernatural element in there as well. And the author didn't really lean into that supernatural element. And I think if they had, I would have absolutely ate it up because what we got of the supernatural element, I really enjoyed. But yeah, and so her husband and her start having marriage problems and such. And I just didn't enjoy that aspect of it. Like, it was just too much, I think. Um, and the story just kind of went off on a path that I did not enjoy. And so that's why I got 2 stars. The next one was Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld, which I actually ended up giving a 3 star. Again, you have COVID, and she used a lot of like real time like politics. Like, I don't mind like real like political people and such if it's historical, but in present day I don't like it. Like, I'm dealing with that. I don't want that in my story. I prefer my contemporaries to have made up people, like, sure, you can do like political and social commentary, but I want the people to be made up. In this case, she referenced current president and COVID and such. And so the basis of that one is you have, is it like what is the business? I can't think of the business right now. But basically, you have this big star, like this music star, and he comes in, and our main character, she feels like when it's a guy dating a hot woman, it's different. Where a hot man superstar would never look at um, a, a not hot woman. Sorry, I can't find my words. Not that she's ugly or anything like that, but she's not hot. And so you have this superstar, like, I think he's a singer, and he comes in and he's good looking and he's, a superstar, and he takes interest in her. And she kind of created her own drama around that as well, like, because she didn't think she was good enough. And then it's like has correspondence, and like COVID happens and everything like that. And I don't know, it was just too like real world for me. And I'm like, I don't want that in my books. The writing and the story itself were fine. The characters were okay. Like I said, I think some of it was a little too drama-y. They kind of created their own drama. But for the most part, the story itself was fine. It was too real world, the COVID aspect and like actual political people and climates and such. And I'm like, that's not for me. And so even though that one got 3 stars and Gothic Town got 2 stars, I personally, romantic comedy was worse for me. And so that's moving on to battle it out in the next round as far as worst books I've read this year. Then we had the Hopi or Hoppy, I always forget how to pronounce it, Survival Kit by Thomas E. Males. My mother-in-law actually had gotten me that book for Christmas. in 2024. So I wanted to read it. I ended up giving it 2 stars. You do learn a little bit about the Native American tribe and the culture and such, but it was really religious and it was really preachy and like you should live this way, and like instead of learning about the culture and the tribe and such, like it was very religious, very preachy, and I was just like, I don't know what this is, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And so that got 2 stars. And then that's up against Universality by Natasha Brown, which I also gave 2 stars. I ended up reading that one because of, I want to say it was Amy at A Star Reads, like her viewer prompt. And so I ended up reading that one and I listened to it. So it was like a Goodreads, like want to read list or something. And I still don't know what the point of that book was, what it was about, because basically there's this party and somebody gets bludgeoned with a block of gold, a gold bar, and gets bludgeoned to death with that. And you're following a bunch of different people, like you're following like a journalist and like I want to say like the mom of somebody. It was so weird. And there was no point. Like the way it wrapped up, I was like, what was even the point of this story? Like I didn't get it. It was weird and I didn't really know what was happening. And so yeah, it got 2 stars, and that's actually the one that moves on to battle it out with romantic comedy, because I was just like, I don't know what's happening here. So we have romantic comedy and universality. And again, romantic comedy, it was more like how real world it was versus the writing. And so universality is actually in the bottom 3 for the year. Then we had The Butcher Game by Elena Urquhart, which got 3 stars, versus Cat by Pam Johnson Bennett, which also got 3 stars. So we got 2 3-star reads here. The Butcher Game, there was nothing wrong with it. It was just fine. I ended up listening to it because we did a family book club this year, and so I think the first book is The Butcher and the Wren, and then or is that I don't know. It's The Butcher Game and The Butcher and the Wren, but I think The Butcher and the Wren was the first book, and then The Butcher Game's the second book. And we listened to the first book for our family book club, and then I enjoyed it enough. I'm pretty sure I gave that one 3 stars too, but I enjoyed it enough that I got the audio of the next book as well and listened to it, and it was just fine. Like I enjoyed the serial killer's perspective versus the detective's or the medical examiner's perspective. I just found her kind of boring. So basically, the premise of this is you have this medical examiner, and she's kind of on this trail of the serial killer, and so you're getting both perspectives. Um, and so it's book 2, so they're still kind of going back and forth. But yeah, it was fine. Like there's nothing specifically wrong that I didn't like, but I didn't just love it. And I found the medical examiner, the female perspective, just kind of boring and lackluster. And so yeah, it just got 3 stars. And then Cat versus Cat by Pam Johnson Bennett, like I said, also got 3 stars. And that one I had found at a thrift store, and I read it right away. Like when I got it, I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna read this." So we have 3 cats, and sometimes they fight a little bit, and you're having to yell at them. And I worked in a vet clinic for almost a decade. I've done dog training. I've done a lot of education around cats and such. And I think for somebody who's new to cat ownership, especially if they have multiple cats and they're new to ownership, it would work better for them. But again, she kind of like talks down like you're kind of stupid, and it's more, it really wasn't about like the cat relationships with each other. It was more about introducing a new cat to a household that has multiple cats. And she is like very idealistic, like, oh, you should do this, this, this. And yes, in a perfect world, like that's what you should do, but it's not. You work with what you have. And so like our cat setup, according to that book, is completely wrong. And they don't fight. over that. It's in general, like when they're out milling about and such, but when it comes to like their food and such, they're fine. And so it's like, yeah, in an ideal world, but most people don't have the ideal setup to be able to do these things. And so she did kind of like talk down to you and like, well, you have to do this or you're going to run into problems. And a lot of it was like more common sense, especially being a cat owner and have working in the industry, and having a lot of education around cats. It's like really, but even as just a person, I think some of it was common sense. So that one actually is the one that goes to battle it out. I dislike that one way more than the Butcher game. Then we had The Deep by Nick Cutter, which got 2 stars, and The Antidote by Karen Russell, which also got 2 stars. The Antidote was a Goodreads giveaway. So let's talk about The Deep first. The Deep by Nick Cutter, again, read for our family book club. And the whole premise is you have, I think he's like a veterinarian or something. There's a veterinarian and a scientist. Anyway, and he gets this call, and his brother has gone down, I think it's the Mariana Trench, and they have like a research station down there, but they've lost contact. And the last message his brother sent out is like to get him. And so they bring him in and they send him down. And he goes into this scientific area, trying to figure out what happened to his brother and such. And there's just weird happenings down there. And I hate horror that just uses like gross and obscene things just for the purpose of being gross and obscene. It doesn't add anything to the story, anything like that. These are grown men, like they're in their 30s, I want to say, and they're seeing children like wheels on the bus go around and round, and I'm just like, there's and they're intelligent men, like they're a scientist and a veterinarian, like come on. And constantly like sing song stuff. And then the big bad, kind of what that whole thing was just like really, because I kept reading it even though I was just done with it early on. I kept reading it because I wanted to know what was going on with the science station. So I had an investment there even though I wasn't enjoying the writing. Very kind of crude, and like the way these men were acting, like you're grown men, why are you seeing wheels on the bus, So anyway, and then the ending just was a big disappointment to me. The Antidote by Karen Russell had so much potential. Again, the author just tried to do too much and they lost focus of the story. So in that one, you're following a bunch of different perspectives, a couple of which like were completely unnecessary. But it's using 2 real historical events. There was a big Black Sunday dust storm, and then a big flooding. They got a bunch of rain and it flooded. And so she's using that to bookend the story. And you're basically following these different people. One, her name is the Antidote, and she's like this prairie witch. And she can basically take people's memories that they don't want. She can take and store kind of like a bank. So you're depositing your memory with her, and you get a slip. And so even though you don't remember the memory, you can go and retrieve it anytime you want. So you have her, you have this farmer who, why everybody else's crops are failing, his aren't. And then you have his niece who lost her parents and is now living with him, and she's just all about basketball. The niece, I really don't think that added anything to the story, like that basketball, trying to win the championship and such. Like it didn't add anything to the story. And you also have a photographer who was, taking pictures and such for some government thing, which was a real thing, but I don't remember what it's called now. And that one really got away from the author because her pictures would show snapshots of like the past and then also the future. And that future, those snapshots, she didn't do anything with it. It didn't add anything to the story. It didn't really make sense. If she had just had that photographer, her photographs showing the past and like the Native American element there, that would have worked really, really well. But she had the future, that didn't make sense. You had teenage basketball star didn't add anything to the story. The witch, the prairie witch, with the way that was really cool as well. But yeah, it just lacked focus, and there was unnecessary point of views. It got a little weird in the end. And so yeah, it was a big disappointment because it had a lot of potential, and there was aspects of it that were really cool. And so because of that, the Deep is going on to battle it out. And then the next one we had was Many Waters by Madeline Lingle. Oh, well, let me actually go back up. So the Deep is battling it out with Cat versus Cat. And honestly, of the two, at least Cat versus Cat, had some good information in it, where the Deep just really made me angry. So the Deep is going in the bottom three as well. So now we're on to our last four. We had Many Waters by Madeline Lingle, which I gave 2 stars. And we had Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar, which I gave 3 stars. So Many Waters. I love The Wrinkle in Time. This is the 4th book in that series of 5. And I love The Wrinkle in Time. I've read that one so many times, like over and over and over throughout my lifetime. The next 2, books 2 and 3, multiple times. But I've never read books 4 and 5. And so Many Waters, for my birthday, I wanted to read it. And that one's following our main character from the main series, or the main book, A Wrinkle in Time. They're twin brothers, Sandy and Denny's. And so they end up going back through time, and they're in this desert landscape. And they come to this oasis where these people are living. And it's kind of based on Noah and him building the ark. So there's that. My problem with this, it was weirdly sexual. And I consider the Wrinkle in Time series middle grade. Now, Sandy and Denny's in this are like 15, 16, so they are older, so it could be considered YA. But yeah, it was just weirdly sexual, and that was like the whole conflict. Those books are about good and evil kind of battling it out. There's definitely a theology element there, and it was just weird. I'm like, I don't know why. And that's like, the temptress and trying to get them to the dark side by being overly sexual, and like she's all in love with the bad, dark demon person, and are you gonna put a baby in me? And it was just like, what am I even reading? Like, what is this? And so that got 2 stars. And then Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar. I didn't expect like amazing writing, right? I was going into it for a good, fun slasher. That's what I was looking for. The slashing doesn't even start till halfway through the book, and then it starts kind of slow with a couple of killings before it really ramps up. So the second half was a lot of fun because it's what I was expecting going in. The first half, you have this girl, and she moves to the small town with her father after they lose her mom. And something happened a year ago in this town. And so the whole premise of it is you have their town mascot is this clown. And you have these clowns going around and killing people in this book. That was the premise. But the whole first half is like very much small town, Midwestern life. And it was very, other than our main character, which it follows a couple different of the teenagers. But the girl who moves to town and such, like she was not annoying. But the other teenagers were teenagers in the worst way possible. Like the worst way, like all the stereotypical teenager behavior, and just immaturity and such, like teenagers in the worst way possible. So that got really on my nerves. And then, like I said, he tried to like put in seriousness with like the girl's loss of her mother and the reason why, but he didn't devote enough time to it to really develop that. And so it's like, I'd rather you just left it as she lost her mother, her and her dad moved to town. Like, instead of trying to insert these randomly, like the more heavier and more heartfelt points about how she lost her mother and such. Like, it didn't work for the story. It's like, either devote time to that or don't. But don't just like, oh, well, I need to insert that here. That's how it felt like. And like I said, the teenagers, worst teenagers ever. And nothing happened the first half. And so I was kind of bored that first half. And so, yeah, I was just like, but the second half was fun. It was what I was expecting. And so between the two, though, Many Waters, I think, was worse, just because it was just so. Even though I would rather read Madeline Lingle than go back to A Clown in the Cornfield, that sexual nature, like, it was just so weird, and I just don't get it. So Minnie Waters is battling it out with one of the next two. So we have The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava, which I also gave it 3 stars. And then the one that I DNF'd, A Heart for Christmas by Sophie Jomain, which DNFs are 1 stars for me. Normally I don't rate them, but in this case I did rate it because of the reasons I DNF'd it. And like I said, I devoted a big chunk of time to it. So that was an advent calendar one. Let's actually go back to The Truth According to Ember. I'm getting ahead of myself. So The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava. This was a debut novel, and I think some of the issues with it were because of that. Just learning to write a book and such. But basically, you have Ember, and she lies to get a job. So she puts her ethnicity as white, even though she's Native American, and she puts that she has her accounting degree, even though she hasn't completed college and she's actually had to take a break from college. And she gets this job at a startup, and they have a strict no dating policy. Well, she meets the IT guy, Danua, and they end up falling for each other, of course. And she gets caught in a compromising situation with him, and the guy who catches him ends up starting to blackmail her. And so her lives just end up kind of spiraling out of control. The pacing of the book was kind of off. Like, the relationship itself, the pacing worked, but the blackmail, like, it was really rushed in the end. And so that pacing was kind of off. But at the same time, because the pacing of the relationship, like, you couldn't really rush that. And so I don't know, like, I wish, he maybe caught her in a lie and blackmailed her versus catching them dating and blackmailing her that way. I wish it had been a little bit different, and so the pacing would have worked a little bit better. And not Danica, Ember, sorry, Danica's the author. Ember, she's really, what's the word I want to use? Like, she just doubles down. Like, some of the lies you could understand. Like, like, she was getting frustrated because she couldn't get a job. Nobody would even call her for an interview. And so she lies. You can kind of understand that. Sometimes she panics and she lies because she's embarrassed about something. Kind of understand that. But she would double down sometimes, and it just didn't make, like, sense. And I think the author took the lying a little too far for the character. So, like, at one point, Denua has a cat, and so she's like, "Oh, I love cats," even though she doesn't, and she's allergic to cats. And so she's going to spend the night for the first time, and she ends up, starting to have allergies, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Well, they go to sleep, and she wakes up in the morning, and her face, the cat has slept near her, and her face is just like all allergy ridden, puffy, and he's like, "Why didn't you tell me you were allergic?" And she's like, "Oh, no, I'm not." And runs into the bathroom to take a shower. And it's like, that double down, that didn't make sense. The way Danua approached the relationship, I really enjoyed that because it made sense, because he would catch her in a lie and be like, "Look, I'm not going to be with you. You're going to lie and not be honest. And so the way he approached the relationship, I actually enjoyed. Then we have A Heart for Christmas by Sophie Jomain. That one, it was an advent calendar read, so it was 24-day advent, and you were reading a chapter each day, which each chapter was either 15 to 17 pages long, so not terrible. Very, like, again, YA. The character is supposed to be like 19, reads way younger. The drama between her parents, the angst between her and her best friend and her love interest, and the drama regarding her was just over the top. Now, the premise of it, she got a heart transplant, and so she hasn't been to see her father for like 3 years. And so she's coming back. Her father, like, is in like the ski resort town in, I think, France. And so she's coming back for the first time after her heart operation, and spending Christmas with him. Her parents are divorced, they don't get along. The way, like, she talked to her parents in the conversation there was just weird. Like, it's not how communication works. Um and the angst and the fighting between the parents was just ridiculous. So you have her mom on one hand who's very controlling, like you gotta take care of yourself, you have to be extra careful, like live in a bubble. And then her dad's like, you need to live life, like you're healthy now, as healthy as you're gonna be, and you need to live life. And there's kind of a balance there that she needs to find. But she's kind of scared, and she's been with her mother, for the last 3 years. So she is kind of closed off and such. And her best friend's brother's there, and so he's starting to, like try to get her out of her shell a little bit. Like, again, you need to live life. Um, and yeah, just the drama and the angst. But she doesn't want to tell her friend, and her friend like does not get along with her brother, and is always like talking about the girls he dates and like what a man whore he is and such like that. And where I ended it, she basically asked her friend, like she hasn't told her yet, like that, hey, I'm into your brother or anything like that, and they've had a few moments. And she basically like, why don't you get along with your brother? And she's like, basically like, oh well, he dated this girl, he slept with her and then broke up with her, and she tried to off herself. And just like how cavalier she just threw that in there just for the sake of drama just really rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm just like, at this point, everything's been so drama ink spilled. I wanted a story where she started, like, she met this, reconnected with her best friend's brother. And yeah, maybe she doesn't want to tell her best friend. She's nervous. Maybe they don't get along, whatever, but the story being focused on them, and doing stuff together and going out and her starting to open up and be a little bit more relaxed and live life a little bit more. And that's not what you get. You just got a lot of drama and angst, and it was like a teenage soap opera. And I was just like, but like I said, some of the dialogue and such, especially between her and her parents, didn't make sense. Um, and so I did watch Bex reads, when she read it. And so I know what happens in the story now. And I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't continue on. Like, again, just so ridiculous, over the top, as much drama as she could put in instead of focusing on like the story and the plot of her, starting to live her life again and opening up after this major event in her life. And so yeah, that one, even though I DNF'd it, and normally I wouldn't include it in the worst, I would include a book I read all the way through. I think because I read half of it and then I know how it plays out, that I'm perfectly confident, and I couldn't put one of my 3 stars down here when I had that one sitting there. So, of course, out of the two, between The Truth According to Ember and A Heart for Christmas is battling it out against Many Waters. And between the two of those, like, I love Madeline Lingle. Yes, that story was weird. I don't know why it was so sexual, but A Heart for Christmas is definitely way worse. Now, as far as the three, so we have Universality, The Deep, and A Heart for Christmas. A Heart for Christmas, like, it had potential. I like the premise of it, even if the author didn't execute that well at all. I like the premise of the story, and so it's in the number 3 spot. It's not the worst of the year, even though it was pretty bad and I DNF'd it where I didn't DNF the others. I think it had potential. And when I think of the others, they were worse. So even though I made it through them, they were still worse. And so in number 2, I put Universality. Again, like, I just didn't understand what was happening. There was no point to the story the way it ended. But like, I would just listen to it and just it didn't make me angry like The Deep. So The Deep is the worst book that I read this year because it just made me angry. I was not happy with it. Like, it was just gross to be gross. The immature sing-songiness of these grown men who are scientists and veterinarians. Like, what was that even? And then the ending was just a big disappointment. So The Deep was definitely the worst of the year for me. Now let's go into our top 3. So each month, like I said, I do a top 3 that doesn't necessarily correspond with star rating. I did not write the star ratings on here because it really doesn't matter. These are just the ones that they stood out to me. Like, they're going to stick with me, and they have. They're sticking with me, and they were impactful even if I didn't enjoy the story as much as some others. So in January, for our family book club, the first book we read were The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. And that one, like, it really has stuck with me. You have this girl, and her mom starts dating this white man who has like an Asian fetish. And she basically starts fantasizing about taking his eyes because he has like very like striking eyes. And so she basically starts fantasizing about taking his eyes, and it's kind of her development into like a serial killer. And it just was really like interesting, and just really like is gonna I can still like picture, like, there was one scene that I just like grossed me out, and I can still like picture, and it has stuck with me. I read that in January and it has still stuck with me. It's up against The Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackwith. This is book Sorry, I had to check on that. So The Library of the Unwritten is the first one, then it's The Archive of the Forgotten, and then The God of the Lost Words. So The Library of the Unwritten is the first one. All the books in the series ended up being 4 stars for me. And it was mainly just because of the flow of the book. Like, we're following a bunch of different perspectives, and it just didn't flow as well. But as far as content, like, I loved it. So you basically are following this librarian, Claire, and she's the librarian of the Unwritten Wing, which is housed in hell. And one of her books, like, books have like a certain sentience to them, and so sometimes they like try to wander off and such, and like they'll bring one of their characters out. And so this book ends up missing, and so she goes after it, and while she's trying to track down this book, this angel confronts her because he thinks they're searching for this codex. And so this angel confronts her, and so they're go on this grand adventure, but her and a bunch of other characters, to try to track down this codex, and the angel's trying to get it at the same time. And there's one scene in particular where they're in Valhalla, and she ends up doing this battle with words, and that scene is so vivid in my mind. I absolutely loved it. So that was the book that's going against The Eyes Are the Best Part, and The Library of the Unwritten definitely beats out that, because like just the setting and how vivid the author like wrote and painted these pictures in my mind. Like, The Library of the Unwritten wins hands down. Next is The Book of Elsewhere by Keanu Reeves and China Mayville, which is based on Keanu Reeves did this like graphic novel series called Berserker or something like that, and it's kind of based on that. And so basically you're following this, like, it's kind of mythological but also like sci-fi military like situation. And so you're following him, and he's basically trying to figure out like what he is, and there's another entity that's similar to him, and so like they're kind of going back and forth, and it's very like military but also like sci-fi, like secret government experiments, but also there's like this kind of mythological like demigod aspect to it as well. And yeah, it was weird. I didn't understand it at all, but it was very vivid in my mind. Like, I was along for the ride with this guy. Then that goes up against The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell, which is another sci-fi, kind of religious, and you're basically following this group, and they end up going to this other planet. And so while they're on this other planet, like, they're learning about, the nature, the flora and the fauna, and like these life forces that are on this planet as well. That one, it's winning like against The Book of Elsewhere. It was so like such a surprise to me. Like, I did not expect it to have the impact it did on me, to stick with me like it did. Like, it was just, you're basically following, I think he was a priest, and so he's the only one to survive from this planet. So you know that from the beginning. So you're following him, and you're going from his perspective, present day to back in time when they're preparing to go on this trip, and then when they're on this trip, when they're on this planet. And he's the only survivor. He suffered extreme abuse. And it kind of just shows you like because they're the newcomers and they're the ones being treated like animals in some instances and used, for their bodies in some instances. And you're just seeing like the worst of humanity, but in a different light, I guess, but also the best of humanity at the same time. It is just like, I highly encourage you, and even if you're not a sci-fi reader, it is so much more. There is so much depth to that book. Just absolutely amazing. And I was not expecting it. I was like, this isn't going to be good. It's a sci-fi written in the 90s. It's not going to be good. It was amazing. So that one definitely beats out the Book of Elsewhere. Out of the two, the Library of the Unwritten and the Sparrow hands down wins for sure. Then we had Voice of the Ocean by Kelsey Impicciche, who is actually a Sims YouTuber, who I watch, and she wrote a book. And so I heard about this book from when it was a thought in her head through fruition. So I got it. I pre-ordered it. I'm not a big pre-orderer, but I pre-ordered it. I got it. I read it. I loved it. So basically, it's a reimagining of The Little Mermaid, but it's kind of like Little Mermaid meets Pirates of the Caribbean. So I think her name's Celeste. I'm horrible with names anyway, so don't quote me on that. But she basically is being trained like they're sirens, and they're kind of like the soldiers, and they help protect the kingdom and such. She's being trained. They have like their last big test before they, go from trainee to actual soldiers. And she ends up saving Raiden. She ends up saving him, and she was supposed to kill him. And so her mom, who is the queen of this kingdom, is like I can't, break the rules for you, but if you fix this, so you go and you find him and you kill him and you fix this, then you can come back. And so she's basically banished, and she goes and she infiltrates his crew, and becomes a member of the ship. And then, of course, they fall in love, and he has a dog and such. And I really like you get those Little Mermaid elements and you can recognize those, but it felt very fresh. It didn't necessarily feel like a retelling. You got those elements, but it still felt fresh at the same time. And I absolutely loved it. It did end kind of on a cliffhanger. She's writing the second book, but we don't know when it's going to be published. So I'm definitely looking forward to rereading this one and then picking up the second one when it finally comes out. It's up against Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, which is about this older woman who works in an aquarium, and she befriends this giant octopus. And he can't communicate her. It's slightly magical realism. It's more of a literary book. It's slightly magical realism in the sense that you're following his point of view, and he's intelligent and sentient and such. But she has this mystery. Her son, did he die or disappear? I think he disappeared, and she doesn't know what happened to him. And then recently she lost her husband, so now she's widowed. And so she basically only has, this job that she's living for. And he knows something about the son, so he's trying to communicate with her, but he can't. So he's trying to leave little clues, and he escapes his tank and then leaves little clues for her to try to help her figure out what happened to her son. And then you're also following this other viewpoint of this younger guy, and he actually ends up befriending our older character as well. And yeah, it was very beautiful. It deals a lot with grief. I like that you don't get a clean cut answer to the mystery. You definitely get answers, but it's not clean cut. It's kind of speculative as far as what happened. Absolutely love that. Out of the two, Remarkably Bright Creatures definitely wins. It's sticking with me more than Voice of the Ocean. And those two will come back up in our top books as far as star ratings. So So yeah, that one wins. And then we have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, which I absolutely loved. And so I ended up reading the whole series this year. I was reading Black Sun and I wasn't even halfway through. I was like, I have to get the next two. Like, I need these books. And so that one, you basically have this world. And so on one side, it's kind of like a crescent shape, and there's the sea in between. And on one side, you have Shiala and Serapio. Serapio is blind and scarred, and Shiala is hired by this lord to transfer Serapio across the sea, and he needs to get this to this town of Tova by the convergence, which is basically an eclipse. And so that's her task. So you're following them. I love their relationship. Then on the other side, you have these four factions, plus the outsiders who live in the Coyote Maw. And then you have the priest, which are the watchers. And so you have four heads and then, the disciples or whatever. And so there's kind of supposed to be a separation between church and state, for lack of a better term. So like when a faction sends somebody to the tower, they're supposed to kind of sever ties and such. But they don't necessarily always do that. There's kind of this scheming against our one watcher who actually came from the Coyote Mall. So she's kind of an outsider, and the way she became a watcher, like nobody thinks she should be there. And so there's kind of some scheming between her. There's unrest with the factions. One of the clans, the Crow clan, they were slaughtered by the Watchers back when. And so they kind of have a lot of resentment there. And so, yeah, you're dealing with a lot of politics. Serapio's trying to come in. The magic is not like in your face, but there's definitely magical elements there. And then it does end up dealing with like gods and goddesses and such. It was just, there were so many moving parts. It is kind of complex, but it was so well written. Like, even though you're following a bunch of different point of views, and Shiala and Serapio, like those characters are some of my favorite characters to date. I absolutely love them. It's going up against the Dungeon Crawler Carl book, the very first one by Matt Dinniman. And yeah, that series, like my husband and I have just fallen in love with it. We've read, like in November, we read two and started a third, which we finished in December. We're taking a little break because we have a Nora Roberts book we need to read, but we still have two books to go, 6 and 7, and then 8's supposed to be out this summer, I think. And I think there's projected to be 10 books. And yeah, that series, like you have Carl and Princess Donut, and basically the world collapses. Anybody that was inside a structure is gone, and anybody who was outside has the option to go down into the earth and be in this dungeon, which is a video game slash like reality TV for aliens. And so there's a lot of like political and social commentary, kind of packaged in this really funny book. And so you're following Carl and Donut, who is his ex's cat, and she ends up getting a pet biscuit. And she becomes sentient and intelligent. Well, not sentient, I mean, they already can think, but she becomes intelligent and can talk, and she ends up becoming a player in the game as well. And so they're going through these different floors of the dungeon, and they're having to, kill creatures and get experience and level up and things like that. And it is just so much fun. I've laughed so hard during it. My favorite is book 3. My husband's favorite is book 1 because he says that it's really well done. The way the author like introduced the characters and the setup and everything without like bogging it down. Like he gives you all the information you need, but in a way that you're not like slogging through it. Of the two, though, I gotta go with Black Sun. I just really love that one. And between Black Sun and Remarkably Bright Creatures, Black Sun wins for sure. I mean, I loved Remarkably Bright Creatures, but it has faded a little bit at this point where Black Sun, like, I'm still right there. I can remember scenes from the book and everything like that. Then we have The September House by Carissa Orlando, which is a horror book. And basically, you have this woman, and her husband always wanted to own their own house. So they end up buying this house, and every September's the walls start bleeding. You always have ghosts throughout the year, but the uptick in ghosts and the activity really ramps up in September. And her husband just can't handle it. So he ends up disappearing. And then her daughter's like, "Where's dad?" And it's September. And so she's like, "You don't need to come. Like, it's all fine." And her daughter ends up coming. So she's trying to, like, make sure her daughter doesn't realize what's happening and make sure, like, oh, everything's fine. It does deal with, like, domestic violence and such. And yeah, it was just like the ghost and like this house. It was creepy. I absolutely loved it. And then it's up against The God of Lost Words, which is the third book in the Hell's Library series by A.J. Hackwith. Again, can't really tell you a whole lot about that because I already talked about the first book, but basically it's just continuing and you're learning more about the library and these characters and what is a story, what is a library, and everything like that. Of the two, the September House does win, though. It's more vivid in my mind. I really enjoyed The God of Lost Words, but it's not as vivid as that first book in the series. Even though, like, I can still picture scenes from it and such. The September House definitely wins because some of those pictures that were painted were crazy. Then we have The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. That one, we're following this Native American. Well, so it starts off, you're in present day, and this journal from that main character's ancestor is found. So she starts reading this journal, and this journal, he is getting like these confessions from this Native American named Goodstab, and then he's writing it down in his journal and reflecting on it. So you have, the present day granddaughter named Etsy. You have her perspective, which is her perspective is just in the beginning and then at the end. And then in the middle, you're going back and forth between the priest and or pastor. He's not actually a priest, he's a pastor. And Goodstab, the Native American. I started to physically read it. I was quite a bit lost, and so I moved over to listening to it, which the narrator for Goodstab was so good. The priest or the pastor's narrator was really good as well. And so you basically have Goodstab, and he's coming into this pastor and telling his story. And yeah, it's vampires and Native American, and he's, it's a revenge story against the whites as they came in and slaughtered the buffalo and slaughtered his people and such. And yeah, I love the unique take on vampires for sure. I thought it was really interesting. Then we have Scary Book of Christmas Lore by Tim Rayborn. And that one was basically mostly European, but a few other cultures as well. Basically, like the monsters like Krampus and others, like the darker Christmas entities, and like a little bit about like Saint Nick and such as well. And it was just really interesting. The artwork was fantastic. And he basically goes through and he talks about different like dark entities that are associated with Christmas time. And so that was really interesting. But of the two, like I can't remember other than Krampus, like a specific one, like their name or anything like that. So I'm definitely going with the Buffalo Hunter. And between the Buffalo Hunter and the September House, the Buffalo Hunter definitely wins. And maybe it's just because I read it more recently. I don't know, but it's more vivid in my mind. So we have our three, which is the Sparrow, Black Sun, and the Buffalo Hunter. Bottom of those, I would say the Buffalo Hunter. It has faded a little bit. It's not as vivid in my mind. Then we have Black Sun. As much as I love that, it just didn't have the impact that the Sparrow it did. And so the Sparrow is definitely number one as far as impact. Like it was just, and it was so surprising. Like I did not expect that from that book. And like it made me cry. And I just had to sit and process. Normally, I'm done with the book, and I move on with my life. That one, I definitely had to kind of sit and process it a little bit. So that's definitely the top one by impact. Now we have our top by star ratings, which is just my enjoyment. I thought the writing was well done. I was easily able to get into the story. I enjoyed the story. Like it, took me away. It took me on an adventure. Those are my star ratings by enjoyment. So in January, I read The Witchwood Not by Olivia Atwater. So she had her Regency Victorian series, and this is Regency Fairy Tale series, which I loved. And then this is the Victorian Fairy Tale series, which this one I don't remember. It was published a while ago, and it was supposed to be a series. And her nothing this year, I finally saw on her Instagram that the next one is coming. So I'm very excited about that. But basically, you're following. She's like a governess, but she's not really a governess, and she's in this house. And she ends up needing help from the butler, who's not really the butler. He's actually Fae. And this house kind of like it has a duality to it. And so you have like the real world house, and then you have like the mirrored house in the Fae world. And it's really, really interesting. And so, yeah, she's having to kind of figure out um, like what's the deal with this house and this boy and take care of him, even though she's not a governess. She does like children. And I just really like the relationship between her and the butler. I forget their names at this point. Like that was last year and I've already forgotten their names, but it was really interesting. Then that's up against Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett. I love the Emily Wilde series. I believe this is the third one in that series, and I listened to all of them. The audiobooks are great. And so basically, you're following Emily Wilde. She's a scholar, and in the first book, she's researching these very elusive fairy types. So she kind of goes off into like a remote area, and then her rival, like her academic rival, Bramblebee or something like that, he ends up coming and they have a relationship. So there is a little bit of romance in there, but so cozy and whimsical. And then in this last one, it kind of transforms and it's more in fairy itself. And so that was really interesting. But of the two, the Witchwood Not, like those Victorian, the house, like I love uh, a good story where a house is a major part of the story. So the Witchwood Not definitely wins of those two. Then we had A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon, which is the prequel to Priory of the Orange Tree. I love this. I really enjoyed it. I can't really remember it at this point though. Like I remember enjoying the writing. I remember Priory a lot more, but as far as A Day of Fall Night, I don't really remember it. So then we have The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden, which I loved. Again, you have like Russian folklore, which I love any book that deals with folklore. And you have our main character, and her stepmom is very religious. And this little village, like her dad's like the overseer, and then you have like the people that live there that work under him, basically. They work the land for him. They're like the tenants of his. And they kind of worship the old gods, like the god of the hearth and such. And her stepmom's like, absolutely not. Like, you follow the new god. Well, this ends up causing they offer protection, and so it ends up causing this dark entity in the woods to start to awaken. And it's based on this, I forget the name of the story, but basically the story where you have the stepmom, and the folklore is this young girl, the stepdaughter, ends up in the woods and falls asleep or something, and the Winter King comes and he brings her home and like gives gifts to her and such. And so the stepmom tries to trick him with her real daughter, and sends her out into the woods, but it's not honest. And so she ends up like freezing to death or something in the story. Not in this one, but in the original folklore, I believe. I could be mistaken, but I think that's how it plays out. And so, yeah, I like things that are based on folklore, especially from different cultures. And so that's kind of what it's based on. But you have this dark entity in the woods that is starting to arise. So that one definitely wins because I obviously remember it better than A Day of Fallen Night. And between The Bear and the Nightingale and The Witchwood Not, The Bear and the Nightingale absolutely, hands down, wins. Then we're back to The Voice of the Ocean by Kelsey and Impicciche and Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. In this case, as far as enjoyment and books I would want to pick up again, Voice of the Ocean definitely wins. So even though it didn't have the same impact as Remarkably Bright Creatures, as far as enjoyment, I definitely enjoyed it more. Then we have The Blood Traitor by Lynette Noni, which is part of the Prison Healer series. And so in the Prison Healer, you're basically following this girl, and she's in prison. And obviously, she's the healer, the name of the book. And they end up getting this prisoner. She's tasked not only by the prison higher ups to keep this prisoner alive so she can face these trials, but also by this rebel group that she needs to keep her alive. Well, the prisoner's so sick that she can't compete in these trials, so our main character ends up volunteering to compete in the trials, and if she wins, both herself and the prisoner will be free, and then if she loses, they'll both be executed, or she'll likely die in the trials anyway. And so that's the main focus of the book, and then it kind of goes on from there, but it really deals with like politics, and you have like the kingdom and the rebel group. So even though like the first book starts in the prison, it really takes off from there. And then we have Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman, which I already talked about. Again, it was in the top 3 by impact as well. And that one definitely beats out The Blood Traitor. It's more fresh in my mind. It has stuck with me more than The Blood Traitor, as much as I enjoyed that one. So there's that. Between The Voice of the Ocean and Dungeon Crawler Carl, The Voice of the Ocean definitely wins. Next, we have Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab, which is you're following 3 different timelines, and it's a vampire, like toxic lesbian vampires. The main reason I love this book was our first timeline with Maria, I believe is her name. That timeline was so like the character arc. You start with her when she's a child, and then you see kind of the toxicity that she devolves into, and it's just amazing because like she's not good and you don't like her, but like you felt for her as a child, and you can see like the author did so well. Like you can see the characteristics and traits she had as a child and how those became problems in the adult vampire version of her. And so that specific timeline was really good. And I liked how like you start off mainly with her and then she interweaves the other 2 in, but you really don't get the middle timeline until the end. And the way she did that was really fantastic. And that's up against the next I think it's is it book 2 or is it book 3? No, I think it's book 2. Carl's Doomsday Scenario by Matt Dinniman. And that one, again, we're on a different floor of the dungeon. That one, the floors where they're not necessarily, it's more like different setups where it's more like, they have like cities and towns and such, and more like quests that they have to complete versus just like battling the mobs and getting through and like solving puzzles and trying to get through the dungeon. Those floors aren't as big because we read 2 of those now, and they're not as fun for me. And so I did enjoy that one. Like obviously it got 5 stars. It was the top book of that month. But out of the 2, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil definitely wins as far as my enjoyment. Then we have another Carl book. This is book 3. It is my favorite. And that's the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook, again by Matt Dinniman. And that floor is like a maze train station floor. And there's so many scenes from that floor that really, like all of them, all the books have had moments where I've been laughing out loud and like just gives me a good chuckle and I can really vividly picture it. Book 3, that floor in particular, like had me rolling so much, like tears streaming down my eyes. I really enjoyed book 3. And then that's against My Sergei, A Love Story by Katerina Gordieva with E.M. Swift, which I reread every year. This year was, I want to say, my 6th time reading it. So I reread it every year. I read it originally as a teenager, and then when I started my booktube channel, I started reading it every year. And it's just such a beautiful story. So it follows Ekaterina Gordieva, And she, in the 80s and 90s, was paired with Sergei Grinkov, and he ended up passing away of a heart attack suddenly, quite young. And they were my mom's favorite pair skaters. And so I have very vivid memories of watching, the skating, not necessarily specifically them, but watching them with, that was my mom, especially the Olympics, but even, just in general, she would watch them. And yeah, and so she introduced me to this book back when I was a teenager, and now every year for her birthday, not that she cares, but I reread it, and it's just so beautiful. But of the two, obviously, the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook is my favorite Dungeon Crawler Carl book. And as much as I love my Sergei and I reread it every year, I gotta go with Dungeon Crawler Carl. So our top three then, oh well, no, between the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook and Bury Our Bones, again, gotta go with Carl. So our top three is The Bear, the Nightingale, The Voice of the Ocean, and the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook. The bottom of those is number three is The Voice of the Ocean. It has faded a bit. It's not as vivid in my mind, and honestly, I just enjoyed the other two more. So number two is The Bear and the Nightingale. Like, folklore, is gonna win every time. So I love that. And then the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook, like that's just, I still remember vivid scenes from it. I absolutely loved it. It was just so funny, and reading it with my husband, I get a lot of enjoyment out of it as well. So the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook, then The Bear and the Nightingale, and finally The Voice of the Ocean. So those are my stats and the best and worst of the year. I would love to know if you've read any of those and your thoughts as well. As far as what to expect on this channel going forward, it is going to, change a little bit. Instead of doing monthly wrap ups, I'm going to do a weekly update. I think that's just going to work better. My game, I'm not going to be doing it monthly. I'm going to be playing around, reading the books, playing around. And if there's a book I'm just not feeling, I may not get to it. So the rewards will still come in effect if I finish that complete TBR without saying, you know what, I don't want to read that. It's going back on the shelf and I want to start anew. Then I'll get I won't get a reward. Where if I do finish the whole TBR before I play the next round of the game, I'll get a reward. And I am going to still do vlogs. So basically the way it's going to work is I'm going to do a weekly update. I'm kind of doing this, the channel books I'm not reading, Kelly, she does it like this. And so it's like a weekly update as far as what she's been reading for the past week and such, maybe what's coming up. So that's going to be my weekly videos just to keep the channel consistent. And then any other videos, so my gameplay, like right now I'm working on a vlog with library books. Any of those videos will just be extra. So you can look forward, those just pop up when and if I film them. And so if you want to make sure you don't miss those, make sure you have that notification bell checked. Otherwise, you'll still have your Monday videos where I just talk about the books I've read the week before and kind of what's coming up. And it will just be a weekly update, and then everything else will be bonus. I just kind of want this year to be a little bit more relaxed. Like every year I say I want to read a little bit less. I'm a person, like, especially with my autism, when I get into a hobby or something, I get like hyper focused on it, and like that's my life. And so I would like to get back into cross stitching. I haven't done that, playing games and such. I have a project that I want to work on this year. I'm not really wanting to talk about it yet, but there's a project that I want to work on this year. So I just want my reading to be a little bit more relaxed. And so focusing on other things during the day and then just reading more naturally at night. Like obviously I don't work, I stay at home. And so I have a lot more reading time than a lot of other people. And that's why I do read so many books. But at the same time, like that's become the hobby. That's what I'm focused on. And so when I have downtime or whatever, that's my focus. And I just want to be a little bit more relaxed so I can work on cross stitching and do puzzles and work on this other project that I'm going to try to prioritize this year. And so, yes, but I want to keep this channel consistent. So that's why, like I said, my plan is to do weekly updates and then any other videos I do, like my game and such, will just be bonus. So that's the plan. I don't have any specific goals. I would like to read less. So I want to get under 200 books this year. I know most people are trying to read more. I want to read less. Like, I love reading all these books, but I want to be able to prioritize other things this year. And I can't do that if I'm reading a mass amount of books. Of course, April, September, and December will still be my 3 big reading months, because April and September are Aurelium, which is by G at Book Rose. And then December, I do my 24 days of Bookmas. And so that's going to be still, I love 24 days of Bookmas, and I really have been enjoying participating in Aurelium. So those are still going to be really big reading months, but the other months I just want to slow it down and focus on other things. So that is the update. I am doing my wrap up for December, so that will still come out, and then probably mid-January. I'm not sure when this video is going to come out, but mid-January is when I'll start doing the weekly updates. So definitely look forward to that. Like I said, if you've read any of these books, or let me know down in the comments, or your favorite book of the year, your worst book of the year. I would love to know that down below. If you just want to let me know you're here and you're helping to support the channel by commenting, you can always leave a rabbit or any type of animal emoji. And I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.